Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Weeb, and I work at the National Trust for Canada. And I'm here today for Canada Historic Places Day to help launch it off. And today what we're going to do is really look at this National Trust headquarters and Andrex Holdings structure across the street and talk about that. But first off, I want to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, and thinking about Indigenous peoples this week, of course, and then every week. So today we're going to be looking at the Davidson House across the street, and I'm so thankful to have with us today Sandy Smallwood, who owns the house and who purchased that structure building back in the late 1970s. And he's actually, Andrex Holdings owns a number of historic apartment buildings around Ottawa and beyond. And looking forward to learning more from him. Sandy, do you want to talk a little bit about this neighborhood?
Sure. So this is the year 2020, and Ottawa's got a population of over 1 million people now. And as you can see, we're in a very sort of downtown urban area. But if to set the stage, I guess if I can say, if we think back over 130 years, this wasn't known as Bronson Avenue then, it was called Concession. And it was the outside of the urban area of Ottawa. And it was actually a kind of like almost going into the suburb. But it was a very important area. Whereas now this road, Bronson, takes us from the downtown out to the airport. Back in those days, Bronson was a perimeter road, but it was important because at the far end of Bronson up here, we'll see there's a steep hill you can see dropping down. That leads to the Breton Flats, and that's where all the action was back in those days. That's where the lumber mills were, that's where planing mills were, and a lot of the people that worked in those lumber mills and planing mills lived down there. The owners, the lumbering families that owned those, lived on the way coming up the hill. So what we had here was various families, most of whom were involved somehow or other in the lumbering business, who owned a series of houses. Two very beautiful houses down at the bottom of that hill, the Nanny Goat Hill, which is famous for its winter wipeouts, were the Bronson family. And they had two beautiful houses there, which were both sadly demolished for road widenings. And then as we come up the hill, on both sides of the road, there were beautiful older houses, some of which were demolished for road widenings, some for this apartment building. And then as we see on this side here, these towers were being built when I purchased the property. And there were actually 3 very attractive residential homes with porches.
Right here, yeah.
Interested back in those days, when I first purchased the building, there was more street activity in terms of people and pedestrians than there is now. Although there's a lot more people living here, there's a lot fewer people in the streets. And as you can see, it's a bit of a harsh environment.
Yeah, there's hardly anybody on the street now. I mean, here's a cyclist coming along, but it's quite a noisy, busy street going out to the airport.
It's pretty unpleasant.
What is that house down at the like on the corner there? We're at Laurier and Bronson, right on the sort of western edge of downtown. You're
so that's a replacement house. It was the Fleck House. There was a house there before that burnt down around the turn of the century, and then this house was built. And there's now plans underway to build a 21-story apartment building essentially over top of the house.
Wow.
So it'll still be there, or parts of it are planned to still be there, but it essentially will have changed character dramatically. As you can see with this house, there are 2 houses to the left that I purchased in the 70s, but then of course, just south of it, you see the tower that has gone up now, and it's sort of an indication of the transition that's occurred and has been occurring in this neighborhood since the 60s, essentially, and accelerated in the 70s and 80s.
So basically, this was just taken, like this condo tower just went in very recently. It's actually the Ottawa Construction Association used to have their headquarters there, so things are changing. I guess there's sort of a pocket. Your 2 the houses that you purchased back in the 70s here, there's a pocket other houses behind it too, right?
Yeah, I own the two houses behind as well.
Oh, okay.
So that has sort of protected this little enclave.
I think we have the light here, Sandy. We better go across.
Okay, we'll cross over.
This is quite astonishing. It's rare to get this light. So this house, how would you describe its character, I guess?
So it's the architectural style is Queen Anne. And the characteristics of Queen Anne, in fact, if we go over here a bit, because one of the things, characteristics of Queen Anne is the chimney. So you'll notice right away how prominent that chimney is. Like it is, it's super detailed, super big chimney, which we restored about 20 years ago, and is one of the outstanding characteristics of a Queen Anne architectural style. So this house is considered one of the finest remaining examples of Queen Anne architecture in Ottawa. And the characteristics, aside from the chimney, are the projecting front bay. Yeah. Quite obvious. And it's also renowned for its leaded glass windows. You can see very prominent in it. And it has a lot of architectural embellishment.
Different window shapes, different kind of roof shapes. I mean, it's quite elaborate and intricate and varied, right?
The steep roofs are one of the other characteristics of the Queen Anne. So it is a very distinct Queen Anne. And of course, the porch is one of the big characteristics too, because back in the day, when guests arrived, if you can imagine, this was a dirt road. It was only 2 lanes wide. And out of the road, just over here, there was a big granite stone that was for people who arrived by carriage, that they could alight on to the granite stone for entering up to the house.
So, Sandy, I guess the street would have been out to about, would have begun.
Out to where those lines are.
Oh, really? That's where the yard went out to there.
Yeah. So when I purchased the house, one of the things that the municipality insisted on, which I didn't agree to, was they wanted to widen the road 1 more lane.
Oh, they get a 3 lane on either side.
That's right. And I was actually, at the time I bought it, it was high-rise residential. So I could have torn the 2 places down and built a high-rise. It wasn't designated. And I wanted to change the designation from high-rise residential to heritage commercial. And one of the conditions they put on was the ability to widen the road 1 more lane.
Interesting.
And I was absolutely adamant, because I just couldn't imagine what that would have done. They said they wanted to widen it so they could put a bus bay right in front of the building, right up against the porch. And I felt that would have really destroyed it.
So in terms of getting these 2 buildings are both designated, you had them designated. Were there challenges around that, or was the value of them recognized very quickly by the city, or what was the process?
Actually, in the 70s, at the time, the whole heritage movement was at its beginning, and most of city council didn't buy into the idea of heritage. There were 1 or 2. Diane Holmes was one of them, who was the city councilor, who was supportive. But a lot of them were not really understanding of the logic and didn't see how it would benefit the city, because they saw it as not being the way that the city was growing, and growing meant taller buildings and tearing down the old and bringing in the new. So there wasn't a lot of support for heritage, or the concept of heritage at the time.
And so I guess with this building, I guess maybe we should back up then and start talk a little bit more about Davidson and some of the things that he did, and we can get into the details of the conservation efforts that you put into making this such a spectacular place to work. So what's Davidson's story?
Okay, so the one thing I love about old buildings, restoring old buildings, is doing the research into them. And so the first thing I did when I bought the property was start doing research into the Davidson family, and in fact all the residents of the building. And Davidson was of a lumbering family. There was a factory, Davidson lumber mill and planing mill. And as was the case in those days, they did an awful lot of different things. So I actually met the grandson, Robert Davidson's grandson. He was quite ancient when I met him, but he had lived in the building, had been in the house many times, and actually had some old photographs of it. I was able to tell me stories of what it was like when the Davidson family lived there, and stories about the Davidson family. There is a town, a village in Quebec called Davidson, which the Davidson family was their summer property, and also was part of the land they owned that was where they had the timber rights. And so the lumber they would brought would be floated down here and then taken to the planing mills. And Robert Davidson started as working in the Davidson and the Thackeray planing mills as foreman, where he would have been in control of the operations. And because it was essentially a family business, he was very much part of the family and the business end of things in terms of promoting the Thackeray and Davidson lumber business. So one of the things that when I met with him, that one of the family stories was is that this building was built by Robert Davidson as a wedding present for his new wife, Kate.
Wow.
My belief is that it was probably as much a showpiece to show off the kind of thing that the Thackeray and Davidson companies could do, and a way of entertaining business clients and business people to show the kind of range of products and that sort of thing that the companies could produce, as well as entertaining business associates. So if you want, we can.
Yeah, let's go inside here.
One of the things that I found when I was doing research is that Robert Davidson was left-handed, and when he built the place, he apparently was responsible for painting the sign over the entrance door, the address sign, which is slanted, and that apparently was because he was left-handed.
Well, that is so interesting. So I mean, like the wood, Sandy, for in the building, do you think a lot of it was sourced actually from the family's lumber plots out in the like allotments? Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
And that's
Provenance.
one of the things that we'll see inside. It's just a sheer variety of woods and detailing and trend. Even the porch, you see all the details on the porch that we have. All of it was done with an exuberance that leads me to believe that it was in a way of sort of showcasing the kind of thing we do.
Yes.
Detailing.
But I mean, if you just look across at the other house, I don't know whether they've stripped away things, but it's a far more restrained kind of Romanesque. Yeah, it's not less, exuberant, as you say. Absolutely.
And then you'll see in the entranceway with the beautiful leaded glass window.
Would this have been one of the originals? I guess we should talk about the windows at some point.
So that is one of the original windows.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is another one of the original windows.
As you can see here, there's this wood paneling and wood everywhere. This is a house of wood.
So when I bought the building, so I'll tell you a little bit about the history. In the 1889, it was built by Robert Davidson. And then the Davidson family owned it up until 1928. When my understanding from family is that because of the downturn in the economy and the Depression, Kate Davidson, who was by then a widow, wasn't able to keep up the house anymore and had to sell it. It was bought by P.J. Wood, conveniently called Wood and a Wood House. And the Wood family bought it in 1928. And in about the 1930s, the husband and wife split up. And Mrs. Wood took over the second floor of the house. The daughter took over part of the ground floor. And Mr. Wood, P.J. Wood, who was vice president of the Canadian Banknote Company, as well as being a noted Olympic champion, lived in the front room, which we'll go into. But basically, his space was this front room. And his bathroom, we can see the ghosting on the ceiling here. They took part of the lobby and turned it into a bathroom.
Oh, that's
so when I bought the building, some of the stained glass windows had been removed. So the Wood family owned it until 1968.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was owned for 10 years by two development families, two families who were involved in real estate development. I bought it, it was being sold for land value. The tenants that were in here believed that it was going to be demolished. This I found in one of the tenants' apartments. They said that their grandmother had given it to them.
Oh, yes.
But this piece I found separately.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that the two went together and fit on this post. So I suggested that maybe their grandmother had accidentally removed it from the stairs, and it would be nice to see it reinstated, which we were able to do.
Oh, so quickly, Sandy, I guess looking here, like you can see the outlines of where the bathroom used to be in this lobby area, right? And you've sort of retained that by the kind of the massing on in the ceiling as well.
Yeah, because the ceiling was so beautifully done, I didn't want to disturb the work on the ceiling. So we basically, which ended up working out to our benefit because we introduced central air conditioning.
Okay,
and we had to find
Yep.
ways to do it without touching any of the original woodwork, which was a challenge.
What's so interesting is that the woodwork in the ceiling, it always reminds me of kind of like, I don't know, Dutch Golden Age, Flemish, kind of like there's something, I don't know, they like some of the designs that they use, it's so varied.
Yeah.
And we'll see it in that other.
And you see too the beautiful curved staircase going up, which is a really wonderful detail.
Gorgeous. Oh, why don't we talk about the windows really quickly before we go into that, space?
So one of the characteristics of the building that it's noted for is its leaded glass windows. It's like holding up a piece of crystal and turning it because of the refractoring that occurs with the light as you look at it. So it's a really beautiful feature of the building. And I was really shocked when I was doing the restoration of the windows. So they didn't need very much work, but they did need a little bit. I was really surprised when I found the ghosting of mullions on the upper sash of the windows. And what I realized was, and we'll see when we go through
maybe we
one
should.
of the other offices, that there was actually colored glass in the upper parts of the sash. So we can look. So this was the original sitting room, and it became PJ Wood's apartment after he and his wife split up. And when I purchased it, this ceiling, which is quite a beautiful ceiling, was covered. We didn't know it was there when we bought it.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
There was just a plaster ceiling, but apparently to keep peace in the family, the ceiling was dropped and insulated when the separated husband and wife occupied different spaces within the building. And the story I'd always heard is that door from the main entrance was where people would come into. Was this his office in the front, Davidson's office or a showroom? This not a showroom, but this fireplace, for instance, when we were doing restoration, we removed it to store it and put it back. We found on the back of it a label saying it won the first prize in the 1889 Central Canada exhibition.
Wow.
So it's an example of the sort of thing that was integrated into the house, which was done by the firm and then formed part of the house eventually.
And one of the fascinating things in this house is that you have natural grained wood, but this one is, do you want to talk about what they did with this particular mantelpiece?
Yeah, this is graining and it is artificial. It was done, this was a sort of a big thing in the day to take a natural wood and change the look of it by putting in artificial graining.
You can see it's a darker wood naturally, right?
That's right. So this is probably could even be mahogany or something, but it's been grained, and that was quite a skill.
Yes.
And throughout the building, we'll see areas where we transition from the natural wood, and the woods here range from oak, ash. There's bird's eye maple. These panels here, just as an example, you've got ash.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Bird's eye maple, oak, and then on this side you have. So they're doing different panels with different medallions on doors adjacent to each other.
Yeah,
which almost strikes me as being, and you see even the different trim pieces are done differently.
Oh yeah, of course. So like that, some of these detailing is different.
Yes, so it's almost like they could say, well, if you like this, we can do this or produce these pieces for you.
Yeah. There was a question coming in. Somebody wanted to know Davidson's parents' names. Do you know them?
Well, Robert and Kate Davidson were the ones from the more famous Davidson was James Davidson.
Oh, okay.
Who was, I believe, mayor of Ottawa at one time. So,
before the buildings in this house. Yeah.
So, but I focused my research basically on Robert Davidson.
Okay.
I was familiar a little bit with the Thackeray's because there's another house I know that's a Thackeray house, and certainly the family continued on until probably the 1920s, as they say. And at that time, there was a downturn, and although the family, the descendants are around, and I was, as I said, I've been able to interview them, as well as the Wood family descendants. So I'll show you the window
just before we leave, Sandy. Well, we should.
Right,
yeah, we forgot about Look at these
Yeah, we pulled
amazing
these out. So this
photos.
is Robert, now that we're talking about Davidson,
Yes.
this is Robert Davidson and Kate Davidson, and another photograph of Kate Davidson.
Oh, she's looking very ready for an outing of some kind. Oh, so that's Robert Davidson. I love it. These are great. Right,
So this room, interestingly, by looking down what's Gloucester,
yeah.
I years ago, in fact, you can play X's and O's on the ceilings. But years ago, looking down there, I realized that when the trees weren't in bloom, you could see all the way to Elgin Street.
Oh, extraordinary. It's just way down there. Yeah.
Yes. For some years after Mrs. Davidson left the house, she loved it so much. She really didn't want to leave. And for some years after, she continued to come back to the house here.
Mm.
And in fact, even to the point of having guests come and have tea in his front room on the porch. Sadly, at some point or other, I think the new owners of the Woods had to draw that to a conclusion.
Yes.
But it was an indication of just how much she loved the house and how much she really never wanted to leave it.
Well, it's extraordinary how those later owners indulged her, were able to accommodate her.
Yes, and I think
feeling for the place. Mm-hmm.
So I'll just show you the window over top here. I think so. One of the family members that I spoke to. So that's all of the upper sash. These sash would have been a variation on this. It would have been this turned vertically.
Yeah.
So this is a horizontal version. There would have been a similar version on all of the upper sash in the house vertically like that.
Yeah.
My suspicion is that sometime, probably not so long after the house was built, they just found it too dark.
Yeah. See, I think you can see right places like this, you can see where the mullions were cut out.
That's right.
And they just kind of.
And it came as a real shock to me when I was doing the restoration to find that, because the leaded glass had become such a defining feature of the house.
Yes.
To realize it wasn't that way. And actually, there is in one of the servants' stairways, you can see one of the original windows that's left in the house.
I know this is our executive director of the National Trust, Natalie Bull's office, and I know she looks up, and it's somewhat askew, this ceiling. And if you look at it a little too carefully, you can get sort of seasick because it's a little bit like the perspective's it's a little bit distorted. So I think it's quite, although it's beautiful, it's a bit, optically challenged.
So I can tell you too about the doors.
Yes, please.
So when we purchased these doors, this was just a paneled wall, and I noticed some marks on the wall that seemed to indicate that there might have been something there before.
Mm-hmm.
So we did some investigations, and when we put an opening in one of the walls, we found that the remnants of a frame, and then we realized that there were pockets there. And we found that originally, and this partly was research as well with family members, they said, yes, there used to be a pair of pocket doors here. So with the assistance of Julian Smith, the architect, he was able to come up with the drawings based on what was there. The panes of beveled glass were from a house that he had been involved with that had been demolished, and he was able to salvage the beveled glass from it.
Fabulous.
And then integrate those into the pocket doors. And it was fascinating because when one of the family members, the grandson of the original builder, came in, he said it was just like it was when he was a kid in the house.
Incredible.
He was just amazed at how it took him back to his childhood being in the house with what we had done.
Because that would have been just a wall, and that would have been the bathroom back there, right?
That's
So
right.
yeah, so just been a solid wall.
They shut this off when they built the bathroom. This fireplace was added in after his wall when the house was turned into apartments when the family split up.
Oh, okay.
And this backs onto the original fireplace. So we had to discontinue the use of one because you can't do that. You can't have two fireplaces backing onto one flue, which is what they did.
Is that what they did? Wow. Well, they had a different building code, that kind of thing. They didn't.
Well, I don't think it was too much. In the way
So in here, where are we going here?
This is the original dining room, and it would have been twice this size. So what happened is that originally the house was built with a kitchen in the basement, and to my right there was a staircase that went down into the basement. A very, very narrow, windy staircase went down where the servants would have cooked the meals and then brought the meals up into the dining room.
Oh, so it would have been downstairs, the kitchen.
That's
okay.
right. At some point, in the 1930s, the kitchen was moved to the back of the house to the addition at the back of the house.
Mhm.
And this dining room was split into two. So originally this does still above this plaster ceiling, there is a wood ceiling. I
Mhm.
did put a hole into it some years ago, and I could see the original wood paneling up on the ceiling. And so we decided not to uncover it for a couple of reasons. One is that because it was cut in half, there was a substantial amount of damage done to the woodwork. The other thing is that the layout works the way it is. And so the decision was made to leave it. But this light fixture, from what I understand from the family, was original and was originally in the center of the room. So we can see, if we go back a little bit, we can see what they converted into when it became apartments. They then converted the second half of this room into a kitchen.
Okay.
And it also has the rear servants entrance to the house.
Just before we leave, Sandy, I just want to have a little National Trust outtake here. These three paintings are some of a series that were done for Canada or Heritage Day back in the 80s and 70s and 80s. And they celebrated, they commissioned paintings each year and celebrated a different province. So see if you can guess which province they represent, which provinces in one territory over there. Anyway, skill testing question for later. So sorry, this is the continuation of the dining room here, right?
Yes. You can see the
Oh yeah,
ceiling.
here's the ceiling. It would have been like this
it
throughout.
actually transitions underneath both areas, which is why it's kind of, it is, but it actually went underneath there.
Oh, Sandy, you've got to tell us a little bit about some of the other projects you've been doing.
Sure.
This is like the kind of the Hall of Fame in here or something.
Sure. So up here is the Patterson House, Senator Norman Patterson's house, which was interesting. It has a connection to the Fleck House on the corner, the same Fleck Patterson family,
Oh yes.
which was also related to J.R. Booth. And when I purchased the house in 1978, one of the vendors was J.R. Booth's grandson, J.R. Booth Jr. So lots of small town Ottawa family history. That's another picture of the Patterson House with the chauffeur just in front of the, that's right. This house was built with a chauffeur's quarters and a coach house for the chauffeur to live in and keep the car. In those days, there weren't a lot of garages around, and the coach house was equipped to actually do work on the car. Interestingly, in the 1950s, the coach house, Senator Patterson was living in it. It originally been the Fleck House, it became the Norman Patterson House. He was very much opposed to communism and communists, and he lent the coach house to the Canadian government to use as a spy post, because during the construction of the new embassy, they put listening devices in, and then in the basement we found the remnants of what had been their listening posts to attempt to listen in on the Soviet embassy, which was immediately adjacent to the property.
Incredible.
So that's 500 Will Broad.
Yes.
This is the Wallace House. This is a picture.
Yes.
It was originally built in 1876, and we're looking at the more recent 1900 addition that was built to it. It was Ottawa's General Hospital, and I purchased it. It was up for demolition. The federal government put it up for demolition. The community gathered in opposition to it. We made an offer. They rejected it. They went ahead. They were going to demolish. There was another big protest, and eventually we were able to make a deal with them to purchase it. And we converted it to loft apartments, and it now is in fact, it was so successful that it sold out in a weekend.
Wasn't it the first loft apartment kind of conversion in Ottawa? That was very early.
The first converted loft apartment building in Ottawa. And it essentially, what the mayor said after is it created a whole flood of Wallace wannabes who wanted to build loft apartments because Wallace House had been so successful.
Oh, we should look at these. We should look at these newspaper articles here too. Here's one of an early one of this house from 1979. What is it telling us about?
So this is a picture. Here's a picture of the house in 1979, and if you can see, it's kind of dark. And here's a picture when I first opened the ceiling, which was one of the most exciting things for me, opening the ceiling. And I found this beautiful
oak ceiling above it that had been covered over, but was still in remarkably good shape. And here's the
is
entrance.
this the front room?
No, this is next door.
Upstairs,
This
okay.
is 190 Bronson.
Oh, I was thinking
176
this is,
Bronson.
okay. Gotcha.
And then this is the entranceway as I found it with the, you see the newel, the top of the newel post was missing at the time.
Yes.
And it was a very narrow lobby at the time because of course the bathroom was taking up part of it. And this stained glass window had been stolen as well. So my mother actually, who became a hobbyist, did a replacement stained glass window for it based on plans we found from windows from this period. So that was her contribution.
Why don't we come through here? And I always like, because I work upstairs, and I always like coming down through the servants' entrance kind of staircase. It's very narrow. I've bonked my head many times on this, but it's actually the wood continues in here.
Yes, and it continued right up to the third floor, which was the servants' quarters. And in fact, the daughter of the second owner, one of her, she lived up there, and she was, when I interviewed her, she was so embarrassed because she said the first thing she did when she moved in was paint all the woodwork. In fact, you can see before you go.
Oh, yes.
You can see this all was natural wood going up, and unfortunately all got painted. So this is the bottom part of.
Get the light on here, but you can see that his number 5. So this would have been apartment number 5.
That's right. And this was the daughter of the Wood family lived up there. And all of this wood was originally natural wood.
Yes.
But she painted it because she said she'd grown up in this dark house and she just wanted light. And even all those years later, she was still sort of regretful of having done it.
Can you blame her? I don't know, maybe.
So here's another example of the graining that you see.
Yes.
And in fact,
quite gorgeous. You can see some of the brushwork really clearly in certain places.
yes, you'll actually, if you look at it, you can discern a pattern because there was often they used a pattern to do it.
And did you have, what about these upholstered kind of,
So-
or how would you describe these walls?
So upholstered.
Yeah.
So one of the first tenants that I got in the building was running a hair salon. And he had a problem because at the time the zoning didn't allow that. So what he did was, and he was a very flamboyant person and he's very creative. And so what he did was he came up with the idea of calling the hair salon 190 Bronson. And then on the front lawn, he had a big ball that was lit from within and 2 scantily clad mannequins, male and female, holding the ball, which created a huge stir. It was a great way to advertise his business, which was this hair salon. And inside, which is why he loved this place, because it's a very flamboyant place. And this was perfect. And so he did these walls with the fabric, which sort of became one of the features of the place. And the hair salon operated on the ground and second floor.
Would it have been authentic to the period to have something like that with these kind of coverings, maybe? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting.
So here you can see, although it's not that easy to see, but this is what's interesting is they actually did a transition from the natural wood to the grained wood as they got up here.
Yeah, the lighting is kind of tricky.
Yeah.
The house is kind of. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like from this part right here.
Yep.
And
which is
then
natural
suddenly,
wood, and then it goes, and it actually becomes, it's the same wood, but at one point it's natural and another point it's grained.
And this kind of lozenge is kind of like bracket. Anyway, it's all wood. Okay,
Yep.
interesting.
So one of the other things that I can point out, the lighting's pretty good in here, is when we bought the building, in fact, there's this behind here is a picture that was painted of it. This is done the year I bought this was done the year I bought the building by a friend of mine.
The back end looks quite a bit different, actually.
It was quite a bit different.
Like the annex on the back, on the rear of it. Yeah.
And what's interesting is when you look at the building, you'll see there's no sort of detailing here. The reason is that from the outside, you really didn't notice that there was that the stained glass was here, and that's because on the inside they had covered this over, so this was plastered over. And one day I was sort of thinking, gee, on the outside there's these oval or these round windows. I wonder why you don't see them on the inside. So once again, it was a case of poking a hole and then finding these beautiful windows hidden behind the plaster.
Why would they cover it up? It's so strange.
I suspect that it was just they felt they had enough windows. And you remember at the time when this maybe was covered up, these upper windows would all have been colored glass as well, or stained glass.
It would have been like a jewel box in here. It was
Yes.
gorgeous, actually. It would have been lovely.
Well, I think we have greater appreciation for it now since we've lost so much of it
Yes.
than they may have had at the time. Because, certainly at the time, this house was overwhelmed with wood and stained glass and then subsequently leaded glass.
What was this room? What is this big radiator doing here? What was this room originally?
What happened when the house was originally built, you see there's some, which we didn't look at, which we could if we have time, we not.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left, yeah.
The rads in the front entranceway and the front room are beautiful. What happened is I suspect that they weren't sufficient to keep the house warm. And so at some point or other, additional heating was added. And they basically added pipes and then put covers over them.
Oh, okay. So this wasn't a conservatory, or this wouldn't have been like we needed a special heat.
No, that wasn't special for this room. You'll see the same thing in this room. It's the same idea, but in the front room, there's more, which you'll have to pardon. That's my son uses this as his office. So
working spaces. There you go.
You can see. There's
I see what you're talking about.
Much nicer rads there, and if we have a chance, we can look at the front entrance, and you'll see the more for guests the fancier rads that were put in the sort of the more public areas.
So would this be the room with the soundproof floor?
This was Mrs. Wood's room.
I love it.
Yeah.
Stomping around in mine too,
So if you want, we can take a look.
Declare her presence.
A couple of minutes. We can.
Oh yeah, the faux graining is super glorious right here. It's so interesting to think that they would cover up mahogany to make it look like what? Gold.
Well, they often it was whatever was sort of the theme of the day type.
Yes.
Was really done. So we can go down the grand staircase.
Yeah. So this balustrade and this kind of rail, all this wainscoting, it was all here when you purchased it.
Yes, as I say, some pieces had been removed. This had been removed. The stained glass window there had been removed, and this was left. But the front window, the stained glass, it's sort of sad. The window from there had been removed. Like this one, I guess too. This would have had would it have had the colored glass on it as well? Yeah. And this one I found, and I had it next door to get it repaired, and it was stolen. Oh my goodness! It was so frustrating because I just found it, and I brought it out to take it in to get it restored at a restoration place, and I had it in the entrance of the building next door, and somebody came in and it disappeared. So this is one of the rads. Oh, I can see. So it's far more ornate, right? Yes. This is sort of for the. And even the bleeder valve on it is quite attractive. Oh yeah, look at that. Can you see it there? It looks like a kind of an axe almost, right? Like a double-headed axe. Brilliant for a lumber. And it's interesting, we're on Bronson Avenue, one of the major lumbering figures and booth. And yet Davidson was, I guess, a bit of a smaller fry, more of a medium-sized figure in that kind of like universe. Sort of booths. Yeah. So even here on the windows, you see a brass number. Oh, what is that? It's a blue brass number 4. Oh, interesting. So all the windows were numbered. You see the numbers here as well. Yeah. See, this is number 3 here. Oh yeah, look at that. That's really clever. So then you have the number, and you can easily fit on your storms. That's right. Where would they have saved? Was there a shed in the back? Yes, they had a shed in the back. So this is the difference between the original rad and then a newer rad that was added in. Yeah, so, this is a little less. Yeah, a little more pedestrian than the original rads and the detailing on it. Because this room is nice and warm now in winter. I can attest to that after having meetings in here. But I can imagine with 2 of these smaller radiators in here, it would probably not have been up to the. Well, the nice thing too about this, which for people that own historic buildings, and they're always concerned about storms and replacing storms, this is an example. You see, you know how noisy it was outside. Yeah. Well, it's pretty quiet in here. Mm-hmm. And yet we've got traffic roaring up and down because we have these interior storms on it. Mm-hmm. So because we put interior air conditioning and central air conditioning, we can actually we don't have to open them, but you do have the option of opening them. but it's a great way of maintaining the original historic windows.
Yeah.
And all of the windows in this building, these interior storms be 130 years old.
Incredible.
And the exterior ones are well over 100 years old, and all of them are in excellent condition.
Question for you. I know we've talked about this on other occasions, but I mean, just finding the people to actually do the servicing of original wooden windows on your places, on some of your historic apartments. How easy has that been? And like, what are the opportunities and challenges there?
So we have over 1,000 original windows that date back to the 1860s.
Incredible.
In fact, date back to the 1840s.
Amazing.
And we have two people full-time plus some additional helpers. So a crew of 3 or 4 that do nothing but restore windows. That's all they do, is they work on our windows. Basically, you know, in a cycle of going around to the different buildings and restoring where they need it, restoring, making sure the weather stripping's up to date. And generally speaking, when somebody says, "Oh, the windows are rotted," they're not rotted. They just have flaking paint on them. And occasionally, if you have poor detailing, there may be some minor amount of wood that needs to be replaced. But that's the exception, not the rule. Most of the case, it's a case of leaded glass windows. It's a case of taking all the glass out and then making sure all the lead cane is in good condition, and then putting the original glass back in, putting it all back together, making sure it's flat and tight and properly sealed, and then putting it back in. And the same with our double hung windows. It's a case of taking them all out, making sure the weights are still in good shape, changing the ropes on it because ropes often break, putting weather stripping to make sure that they're channels. And we also do, for the most part, the original copper or brass weather stripping.
Oh yeah, that's what it originally would have been, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a bent detailing on copper or brass, usually brass, that stops the wind from coming in. And also there are detailing on the meeting rail where the two lock together, and then the turn which pulls them together tight. So when you have a window that's properly restored, it operates the way it was built to operate initially, which makes a very weather tight and a very energy efficient window. So we've got great energy efficiency without replacing any windows on any of our buildings.
It's so interesting because that whole discussion is so old Quran, because right now, I mean, there's all sorts of incentives out there for people to replace bolus their windows and tear them up. So I mean, like the energy efficiency, the embodied energy of these windows is tremendous. But I mean, they can be almost as efficient as those new ones.
Absolutely, you can get, and I think more importantly, these windows are over 100 years old now.
Yeah.
We have windows that are 150 years old. They will last forever when maintained.
Incredible.
New windows you're replacing them with, these get thrown into a landfill. The new windows last 20, 30 years, and then they're off to a landfill and you start over again.
Yeah.
So when you look at the life cycle of these and the energy efficiency and the fact if they're done properly, there is no way that you're going to get that kind of return by replacing the windows. So you're, from an environmental standpoint and an economic standpoint, you're much better to keep the original windows to a building and restore them. And you're doing the environment a favor and you're doing your pocketbook a favor as well.
I know we're almost at the end of our time here, and I want to leave time for Sonia back at our headquarters to lob some questions at us, if she has some. Question, I guess, about what you've seen over the course of your work as an adaptive reuser of older buildings. And I mean, what kind of changes have you seen in terms of maybe the marketplace for older places? Are you seeing a strong appetite? And I guess how have things changed from when you were first, huge question, first working on these old houses? I mean, has the marketplace transformed completely? And is it easier for people to get into this kind of weird and wonderful world of heritage conservation?
So I would say the first thing that is the toughest thing for people for me to come to grips with was the realization that there is no definition of heritage.
Yeah.
What I realized that my definition is if everybody sitting around the table says it's heritage, it is. It's not age-based. It's not who lived there. It's not the architectural detailing. It's what is important to a community and what matters to them and what helps them understand the history of where they are today. And so any building that's important to a community can be a heritage building. So I think that's one thing that's changed because when I first got involved, heritage was something that was pretty. It was a beauty contest. If the building wasn't pretty, you tore it down. And I think we've moved way beyond that now. We understand the importance of the building and telling a story about society. And so the most modest house can be a really important part of the story of a community and a neighborhood, and even, as can the grandest house. Of course, there are things like the quality of materials used, the architectural design and those things, which of course can be very important as well. But so there are so many layers to it. And I think, as with most things, the longer we're in this thing, the more we understand the complexity of it. I think that one of the challenging things is finding, I know I could restore every old building out there if I could only find an end user who could afford to pay what it costs to restore.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges. Restoring an apartment like the apartment buildings we have, I can replace windows for $3,000 or restore them for $21,000. The tenants who move in, the residents, aren't going to be prepared to pay that much more in terms of rent. Fortunately, I've owned my apartment buildings long enough that I don't have that same economic pressures that a new purchaser would have. And also, there's a lot of government incentives which work against heritage. Things like the energy grants that push people into doing things in the idea of energy savings. So there's always challenges. It's still, I mean, the most rewarding thing for me is when you open something up. As I found when I discovered the secret panel, that was a really exciting thing. And it's part of what makes this so much fun. Discovering the hidden ceilings, like the one above here, is so exciting to open a hole and find that. One of the buildings, when I opened a hole in the ceiling, the original plans, specifications of the building fell out and hit me on the head. It was just one of those amazing things that could only happen to me. But it didn't just make my day or month. It made, it was a decade-long experience of just finding original specifications, which are so exciting. So you know what's original, you know how to, if you have to repair something or replace it, how to go about doing it.
And one of the great things about, well, I think we might have to leave it there. I think one of the great things about working in this space, Sandy, I'll say, is that it shows its kind of change over time, and it shows its layers. It hasn't been sort of brought back to a particular point in time. So that makes it even more fascinating. I think it's about that's the shift that we're seeing with people reusing older buildings, is accommodating current programming into older spaces and modifying that, but also leaving intact the kind of the way these places have changed over time.
Well, and also if they can leave intact the patina of age.
Yes.
I love finding where somebody scratched their initials on a piece of wood trim, or if something shows the wear and tear of decades or a century of use.
Oh, that's great. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for coming out today. Sandy Smallwood, owner of and founder of Andrex Holdings, and for showing us around 190 Bronson, the National Trust headquarters. And it's been really a delight to explore a place that I know very well from working in it, but I don't know it as intimately as Sandy in terms of the space and its past and potential future. So thanks so much. Enjoy your Historic Places Day, everyone. Keep well. Take care.